So what is the purpose of a test? What do we mean by the purpose of a test? Well, of course, we want to test something, but the question is what exactly? So, which specific statistical question is the test meant to address? So remember that a very important part of the structure of a hypothesis test is to identify the numerical question, right? That's the one that I'm referring to here. Which specific numerical test, which specific numerical question is this test supposed to address and answer? Okay. In particular, which parameter does it analyze, and what does it ask about the parameter? For instance, is it asking for whether the mean is greater than a fixed number, or whether the proportion of people who are cured with a certain treatment is less than with the control, or whether the correlation coefficient is not equal to 0? Remember, correlation coefficient of 0 means no relationship, and so on and so on. So this is the particular thing that we want to focus on, and again, that's one of the reasons why we studied this aspect of hypothesis testing in detail earlier on. Okay. Let me give you some examples. So in some situations, you may ask whether the test is examining the mean, the median, or a percentage. Well, if the test is meant to test a mean, then you should be using the mean, and the researcher should be using the mean. If it's meant for the median, then the researcher should have used the median, and so on and so on. Okay, so it's a fairly basic question. Usually, there are not many problems with it. But there are some other aspects of it. So for instance, is it a one-sided or two-sided test? So notice that in the examples above, I give you two one-sided tests and one two-sided test. Okay, it is important to know whether in fact the authors used a one-sided or two-sided test and whether that was the proper choice. And of course, related to that, there is the issue of whether the situation called for a one sample, or two samples, or a matched test. And again, you want to make sure that what the authors used was in fact consistent with what was required. The third item is the statistics of a test. And you might wonder, well, I'm not surprised, this is a statistics course. But this is an important one for two reasons. Okay. First of all, what are we asking? What we're asking are two things really. First of all, which statistics does the test use? So in the number crunching part, although we're not going to look at how the number crunching is done, but it may be important to know, well, which statistics are used in the number crunching process. But not only that, each statistical test not only produces a p-value, but it also produces in the meantime some other statistics. So we may want to know which statistics this test generates. Now, why is that important? Well, in fact, even though this item is the one that you would expect to be the most important because it involves statistics per se, but in fact in a way it is the least critical, in the sense that the reasons why we ask this are, number one, we want to know if the statistics which are reported in the article are in fact consistent with those needed by the test. And secondly, we want to identify certain statistics which are traditionally provided but which in fact really do not tell us a lot of information beyond the fact that they come from a certain kind of test. Okay, so let me give you again some examples. So for instance, does a special test use mean and standard deviations, or does it use median and interquartile range? Okay. If the test uses mean and standard deviation, then we expect those to be listed in the article somewhere, maybe in a table or anywhere else, but they should be there. On the other hand, if the authors report mean and standard deviation, but then use a test that requires the median or the interquartile range, we may start to suspect that something is not right. And now, sometimes there are some good reasons why this is done, but some other times we want to investigate to make sure that in fact the choice was done properly and not out of some incorrect thinking. And also, you may have seen in articles some tables that include things like SSE or F statistic. And you may wonder, what are those and what are they good for? Well, as we're going to see later, these are actually the outcomes, what comes out of certain statistical tests. And it turns out that in fact they're not really that useful. They do contain some information, but nothing really much more than what the p-value contains, and really they come quite often more from tradition and old habit rather than from current need and certainly clinical need. So again, these things we want to identify in order to make better sense of the information provided, identify the important information and the less relevant information.